What if everything you thought you knew about sex, desire, and self-worth wasn't quite the whole story? This is The Reveal, a podcast about what happens when we ask better questions about the most intimate parts of being human. I'm Elle, certified sexologist and life coach. And every week I invite therapists, sexual health experts, wellness leaders, and cultural thinkers to help us explore the layered and often overlooked space where sexuality, identity, and emotional truth meet. These are conversations about how we heal, how we connect, and how we find real joy and relief in a world that doesn't always make either easy. Curious? So am I. This is The Reveal. Oh, and just a heads up, sometimes when I forget a word mid-sentence, I jokingly substitute it with the word vagina, even if it doesn't make sense. It's a habit, but honestly, it makes me laugh, and hopefully you too. Love. We're taught to believe it should look a certain way. Sweeping gestures, perfect partners, and a happily ever after that fits nicely inside a neat little box. But what if that story isn't serving us? What if rethinking love, taking it off the pedestal, could actually bring us closer to connection, not further from it? Culturally, when we mention love for a person, we often assume it's a love between romantic partners. But in reality, love lives and expresses itself intimately, personally, and uniquely through many different forms. So I thought it might be interesting to dive into what it means to decenter romantic love, to separate love from sex, romance, fantasy, from social scripts, and from the pressure to make it look a certain kind of way. What if, instead of centering our romantic love relationship with a significant other, we recentered it to focus on our friends, family, or better yet, ourselves? This conversation is about making space for different kinds of love, and maybe redefining what it means to love and be loved in a way that fills us. I'm Elle, and this is The Reveal. Let's get into it. My guest today is Hodder-Shipp, she, they, an award-winning certified sex educator and relationship coach dedicated to providing accurate, expansive, and compassionate care. They are the lead educator and professional development organization Everyone Deserves Sex Ed. And in her private practice, she helps teenagers and adults build knowledge and confidence around identity, pleasure, relationships, and communication. Most recently, Anne wrote the highly anticipated love language revamp, Speaking from the Heart, 18 Languages for Modern Love, and its accompanying guide, the Speaking from the Heart Workbook, a practical guide to the modern love languages. Welcome, Anne.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for joining me on The Reveal.
Mm-hmm.
I know that title, I wanted it to have gravitas, and I think it just sounds pretentious at this point, but hey.
Or sexual.
Or sexual, that's true. I'm going to just think of it that way. It's more erotic than performative. So I wanted to ask, how do you define love now outside of the traditional romantic lens?
Well, today, how I kind of define it is a couple of things. I think that it's, for your own experience of it, it's a physical sensation. And it's an action, and it's also a choice, and it's all kind of mixed together. So love, maybe distilled, if an alien came in and was just like, what is this love thing? Maybe I would say it can be described as, a deep longing or a deep affection or a sense of very grounded connection to something or someone or to an idea or to yourself. But I think there's something more to it even than just this a longing for, because that also that concept has baggage around, pining or the romance kind of stuff.
Right.
I also think that love could be described as a combo of body feelings and emotions that are individual and kind of unique to the person, which is not a convenient way of selling or marketing a concept, which is why romantic love as or love as romantic love has been so well marketed and
Yeah.
sold to us and packaged in all the ways, because love is kind of subjective, you know? So one of the things that I like to do with folks who are getting support through either the modern love language work or the relationship coaching, or if they pick up the workbook and they want to try to have like a guided step by step around, like, you know, how the fuck do I do this? What does this all even mean? I really start by just thinking, or having them think about and then feel about, if there is, like, if you feel loved by something or someone, what are the emotions that you associate with it, as like step one? And then, you know, you can take your feelings wheel out, whatever it might be. And then you just kind of look at all these different emotions and you see what lights up for you. And do you associate that with feeling loved, like receiving love? And then you kind of like circle them, write them down. And then same, but with like body sensations for folks who have access to that. And just think, you know, when you're feeling loved by something or someone, what does it feel like in your body? And then you circle those down, circle those. And then that's kind of like a starting point for you around like, what is love? What does love feel like? And how would I explain or define love for myself based on not other people's definitions or even Anne's, but like based on my own experience of it? And that would be like a starting point, I would say, to trying to kind of, for people to define and understand love for themselves outside of maybe what other people tell them. I know that wasn't like technically your question. You wanted maybe to explain it, but
it was great. It was great because it made me think of a bunch of different things. Like, I watched yesterday Bridget Everett, the amazing actress, comedian, cabaret singer. She was on CBS this morning. She did an interview with them, and she was talking about how her dog Poppy, who passed away, was her person. And I thought about that and I went, oh man, you know, that can happen. You know, you can feel such a connection to an animal that that animal becomes the most important love relationship that you have. And I think that the way centered love is thought of today is, if it's not romantic love, then it shouldn't be centered. It's less than. Even friendship love, platonic love. And to go back to Bridget Everett, there's a clip they show from Somebody Somewhere where her best friend says, "You're my person." And she said, "I think that's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever told me." And I think we've all had this feeling when we were growing up, maybe not, of falling in love with our friends, or what, you know, Cosmo would probably call having a girl crush, you know?
mm-hmm.
And I want to sort of get your take on the different kinds of love and the difference between deromanticizing and decentering love, because they could be the same thing, but there is a slight difference, don't you think?
Well, I would say, yeah, when I think about it, I think, you know, not to take the generalized slogan, but love is love. And then think of it like, I don't know, lasagna or something. And then there's like layers of other things on top of the love. But love itself, I don't love the idea of categorizing love in those ways, because it then makes sort of like conditions, and it complicates something that I would argue is a universal human experience. But by universal human experience, I don't mean it is the same for each person, which is where we can get kind of stuck. So the two kinds of love I see prioritized the most is romantic love and then family love, but specifically like blood relation family. Like those are the two that count the most.
Yeah.
And then if there's love felt outside of that, that's where it starts to get kind of categorized or conditioned in some way, like girl crush or man crush, or, you know, friend love. It counts, but it's not as important as the romantic kind.
Yeah, it sits at the children's table, as it were.
Yeah, like that's the dinghy that brings you to the real legitimate romance
Right.
love. Like your friends
Right.
hold you over until you find the quote unquote love. Like all of this really is, among other things, rooted in purity culture and patriarchy and honestly white supremacist like hierarchical thinking around what love is the most important. And then you get things like, you know, the ride or die type I do till death do us part kind of idea
Yeah.
of love where like that's the most important. And so you have to be all these other kinds of love bring you or like tide you over until you get to that huge echelon. And that's where we see in it's disproportionately in heterosexual relationships, but it's really like no one's safe from it, where you start to see like the friends start to kind of like be pushed to the side or the friendships kind of die out or it's somehow like a competition with the like number one most important whatever romantic love
Right.
relationship. And so anyway, like that's my immediate thought with that. By deromanticizing love, it's really just taking what I would envision as like if you know you have love, let's say I'm holding love like in my hands, I don't know. And then you have all of this shit imposed on it. All of these norms, these standards, these lies, these constructs that aren't ours, but we swim in them. So they're just layered on. And you're just noticing like what are the layers that are on top of love that are distorting the concept for me or for others. Romance is one of those many layers. If I can just peel those layers off to try to get a little bit closer to just like the distilled like love itself without all that other shit, what would that look or feel like? And for a lot of people when they're just like what the fuck are you talking about, this feels too complicated, the activity that I mentioned earlier around, you know, what does it feel like in your body to feel loved? What does it feel like emotionally? You do the same thing, but specifically like how do you feel emotionally and physically when you're feeling love toward someone or something? And then think about all the times in your life where you've been like, oh my God, I fucking love those shoes. Those are my favorite shoes. Those shoes make me feel like the absolute boss. Or
Yeah.
the time where you're like, I love that musical artist. I love Bridget Everett. She makes me feel XYZ. And notice how easy that comes out language wise. And then think, oh, yeah, what I'm feeling or when I'm experiencing Bridget Everett perform or when I'm hanging out with my animals or when I'm wearing those shoes and walking around and feeling like a boss? What are those body sensations? What are those emotions? And potentially that can kind of open the door to thinking about love, not just in the romantic context, without having to overthink it so much, because a lot of people don't realize they're already experiencing expansive love all the damn time.
Yeah.
But because it doesn't have those sort of stamps of, you know, this is this is romance love, or this is like parental love, and this is the obligatory love that you have to have for that family member because you share DNA and you didn't choose to do so. Without those stamps, you get to really see like, oh yeah, actually, I already experienced deromanticized love. I just didn't realize it because it didn't have all of those markers I was told it was supposed to have.
Yeah. And when you think about it that way, then you can see how much your life is infused with it. And it does sort of lift you up a little bit. I mean, I decided to decenter dating, decenter men a couple of years back. It really freed up my mind in such a way that now I experience my friends that I feel mostly on a daily basis. That and the love for my dog, who I not quite sure loves me, but you know, because I feed him. I think it is taking away those layers and those labels leaves you freer and more open to redefine what love is for you and the importance it has for you in your life in different areas. Might that be something you agree or disagree with?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot there. It shows that it helps you realize that you have a lot of different sources of that already in your life. It's
Mm-hmm.
helpful for folks who are like, oh, I'm not partnered, or I quote unquote will never find, you know, a partner. All like additional toxic monogamy culture kind of attitudes. And they're sitting there thinking like, well, I'll never be loved the way that I deserve to be loved. And then it's just like, okay, that's a lie. Like, let's pause there and check in. But just in general, like Notice all of the sources of love you already have and all of
Yeah.
the places and people and things that you direct your love to already. Like you actually are not SOL, despite what maybe the messaging is telling you. And so that can help sort of counter or cancel out that negative narrative that just isn't based in truth or reality. And then in addition, I think it helps you for folks who are potentially in a partnership, monogamous or otherwise, that feels kind of like that is their number one or their primary. And with that can bring a lot of pressure, either to be the source for the other person or for them to be the source for you. And to recognize all of the other sources of love where you can get these sensations, these feelings that you feel that you need so much. You can actually diversify those sources, take the pressure off the partner or vice versa, which is a really important thing just for any type of, long-term success in a relationship that has a romantic basis. And then you just get to see like, oh yeah, I don't actually have to be so dependent on a single primary individual source. Like how lonely
Yeah.
and also what a scam. And then in addition to that, you just get to kind of see like, oh yeah, there's this idea of like one relationship being your source for all the things that you need. Maybe that also is potentially an unhealthy way of thinking about a relationship in general. And maybe there are experiences of love that I'm missing out on because it's not something that's possible in this particular kind of dynamic. And so then you get to see not just thinking about like other people as sources, but experiences as sources, animals as sources, objects, colors, physical sensations, all these things that light you up in the same or similar way as someone giving you a hug. And you're like, oh my God, not only can I diversify my love experiences with other people, but like, oh, I actually didn't even realize that when I go into my backyard and I notice that there's new growth on the rose bush that I've been trying to keep alive, I have this feeling of delight or safety
Hmm.
or I'm good head pat that is
Yeah.
really similar or the same as the kind of experience I have when someone says, I love you, or your hair looks great, or I can't wait to see you, or whatever it is that brings that in for you. And you just start to realize like, oh yeah, I don't actually have to even really depend on anything outside of myself. If I'm aware of what helps me bring those feelings in, I actually have a
Yeah.
lot more control over that than maybe I thought previously, because we are told that the outside sources are really the place to access this feeling. So you got to buy the
Yeah.
thing in order to get the feeling, or find the
Right.
person, or whatever, spend the money, do this thing. But really, like, you actually can just sit there and think, oh yeah, I actually can identify far more than just a couple sources of this feeling that doesn't even depend on me having to like get up and go anywhere, let alone engage with someone else.
I love what you just brought up, the idea of not relying on one person to be everything, to be all that a significant other would be or whatever. Because certainly I can see someone listening to this and going, but I like the feeling that romance gives me. I love being wooed. I like romance. And what I thought about is that I do too. I love that feeling. And that is a feeling that up until now, I've only been able to get through someone I am dating, right? But actually, what I've been doing is I've been making a choice to treat my friends in a romantic way, but not a sexual way. And what I mean by that is taking them on dates, complimenting them, making them feel good by giving them truthful statements that I wouldn't necessarily think of. Anything that can be put into that sort of romantic state of mind with a primary partner or a significant other or whatever. I see how it could be translated into my relationships with other people I love that aren't that way. And you know what? It works for me because I do feel like I was always the girl who was quote unquote acting like the man in a relationship, opening up doors, pulling out chairs, or doing anything like that. But I do that now for my friends. And it's not labeled. It's just, I get that same feeling of, I want to treat them to this. I love them and I want them to feel good today. I want to hear their opinions about things. I want all of the things, but not the sex. Because let's be honest, if you want sex, you can pretty much get sex anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to be in love to have sex. I don't know. What are your thoughts about that? I haven't really talked to anybody about that in particular.
Yeah, a big part of that is then the sexualization of love and the sexualization of romance. Conflating sex and romance, conflating sex with love, it just further complicates everything. So a lot of this process is an unlearning process and then a very intentional deconstruction, which is, again, like not convenient. It's not neat and tidy. It's kind of like a renovation. Like it's messy and it can feel like, why did I do this? And when will it ever be not a mess? The idea of being wooed or wooing is a romanticized concept similar to love, where I would suggest for folks to just sit and think, well, when I say I like being wooed, what does that mean? Is it just a series of actions? That's information. Is it a series of actions, but it's a physical sensation, like I feel a swirl in my chest or belly? Good, that's information. Is it an emotional state where I'm feeling like, oh, I'm feeling incredibly prioritized? I am feeling like I am in the spotlight for this person. I am feeling seen so fully as a human, which makes me feel safe, which makes me feel comfortable, which means I can put my guard down. It makes me feel respected. All of that, like these are just examples.
Yeah.
And then we can shift out of this idea of like being romanced or being wooed and get really clear on like, well, what does it actually mean for me? And then I can just say that instead of this generalized subjective idea that, again, is marketed and packaged as a product that we are sold. And we absolutely, many of us have like bought hook, line, and sinker our whole lives. So then when we realize like, yeah, what is it? I like to be wooed. I like to feel really safe and seen with someone else. Or I like to be around someone who makes me feel like we are in a mind meld or whatever it might be. And then you get to see, okay, cool. Who are all the people or what are all the experiences that can actually bring that to me? Because now that I've taken this ridiculous made up confined condition of like romance and love and sex, all a scam, all made up, the world becomes your oyster and you don't end up having these feelings of, I shouldn't do this, or is this against the rules? Or maybe I feel a little bit of shame because, oh, I shouldn't be doing this thing or feeling this thing toward a friend because I don't want to fuck them or marry them. So that what's wrong with me? Am I gay? Like all the stuff, all of that is an unfortunate product of the shit we've been swimming in and sold and all of that. And so it sounds like what you are describing is your deconstruction process. And another part of that is thinking about, like language and how do I want to think about this for myself on my own terms. And for some people, that's like redefining the words themselves, like romancing, like romance itself, like woo, whatever it might be. And then for others, it's like, actually, those are words that feel like they're still kind of dragging me or keeping me in the place I'm starting to deconstruct from. And so I'm going to get some scissors and cord cut, and I'm not going to actually use that language anymore. And I'm going to make up a word, or I'm going to use a word that actually feels like it's way more descriptive or representative of the thing that I'm doing, or the roles that I'm wanting to play in other people's lives. Oh, there was one other piece that now is sort of out of my mind, but how does that land? Does that answer the first part of your question?
No, I absolutely. I mean, it's so fucking interesting. And I was just thinking while you were talking, I was listening, but I was also thinking about how well this dovetails into the commercialization of marriage, of romance, and how it was sort of answered in one way by the guy that wrote the love languages, right? Because now you say love language and everybody kind of knows what that means. Like, I'm gifts, I'm acts of service, I'm like whatever. But what you have done is you have taken that idea that's already out there that people already know, and you have translated it into a much more egalitarian, much more expansive view of what these acts mean and what they can mean to anyone that you love, to anyone that you want to build a relationship or have a relationship, whether you've been, married for 10 years or you just met 10 days ago. It is such a great way to look at how you express yourself and how, if you have one, your partner expresses themselves or your friend expresses themselves. Can you talk a little bit more about your book and how it sort of helps us decenter a romantic version of love, and it can actually center us more in a more expansive view of love?
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind is the concept of the five love languages was really just developed by a evangelical pastor based on his own experience of being married for a while and his ideas of things like gender essentialism, biological essentialism, gender roles as biological, neurological, permanent traits, and then took a very broad, difficult to define, very deeply individual and very much constructed a concept or experience, which is love, and then like somehow divided it into these like neat and tidy five categories as though like these are the ways that love happens. And it was really just based on his idea of like, yeah, well, when I help around the house, my wife seems to be less mad at me. So
Right.
acts of service.
Yeah.
And then the distortion of a lot of things, including like physical touch, specifically from someone else, is what love is. Therefore, that person can never say no because they're abusing me. They're not loving me, and I'm love starved. Every time they say no, I don't
Right.
want to do whatever. And then make space for the sexualization of love in general, but especially things like physical touch. And so that concept had been around since '93 and didn't really start to take off until sort of thanks to social media. 2015-ish is when we saw a really big surge, and the publishing house ended up making like a newer version of it to then put out into the world that adjusted some of the particularly problematic shit from the 1993 version. And so when people are walking around, they think of these five categories and they treat them very similarly to pop culture astrology, where they just focus on sun signs, and that becomes your personality trait. That's
Right.
like your forehead tattoo,
Right.
If
Right.
you're a Virgo and if you're a physical touch, I know everything about you and you're not on my dating list.
Right.
But if you're a Gemini and you're an acts of service, we can vibe. Let's go out on Friday. And that personalization and like commodification of a concept, which is just an emotional and physical experience, love, it just makes it extra complicated because it shifts out of it from a mind-body experience and just intellectualizes it based off of what you think makes sense, based off of your ideas or other people's ideas that you think are yours. And then that's how you kind of like roam the world and try to engage with other people. And so the idea of thinking of love like a world language is a great analogy and very helpful. And so my book was just an accidental result of 7-ish years of just modifying the concept of love languages to be far more reflective of just the human experience,
Yeah.
and using them in, mostly at the time, the revisions were happening in institutional settings like rehabs, adults and teenagers in early recovery from either substance use or some kind of compulsive behavior or mental health treatment of some kind, and seeing how things did or didn't land with them, including even like the concept of the five categories of love, and then seeing like, yeah, I'll modify this, I'll modify that, and the result ended up being this far more expansive and less categorized way of thinking about love, because as it should be, it is not a neat and tidy experience and not categorized, because everyone's experience of love like bleeds into other experiences. Like nothing is, bordered with no whatever overlap. And just to think about what is love, or what could love be like if we were just by ourselves, first off, regardless of whether it's a friend or a romantic partner or sexual or a neighbor or whatever. But like, what is it by ourselves? are we able to experience it? Like, does love exist by ourselves? Obviously. So there's a good starting point. So maybe it doesn't depend on somebody else. And then expanding outward, where does love show up in my life that is not just in some sort of a romantic or sexual relationship that we hope will become romantic or whatever the, conditions are? And if the love is there, how am I engaging in that experience that might be different from how I do with romantic relationships? Do I throttle the love because I feel like I shouldn't have that kind of connection with this person I don't know very well, or this person who I'm not going to marry, or I don't want to take on a date or whatever? And like internal questions, or maybe I don't. Maybe like, oh yeah, I really engage with all of these different people and things that I feel my experience of love with. And maybe that's information around why some partners that I have a problem with me or in my relationship, because to them, I am sharing something that should be exclusively theirs.
Yes.
Just examples, like two sides of the coin. And so with the book, it's meant to kind of be an accessible starting point for this deconstruction process, with some introspection, because that's a part of that. And then just to make it feel, because I just don't think we need another 400-page tome about like love and relationships. Though I'm sure I will. I have one that I'm writing because whatever, that I don't know, an inevitability. So maybe that'll exist at some point. But I'm just looking at it now. Like it's not long. It's big font.
It's an easy read.
It's meant to be, because it's like people need information and knowledge now. So you should be able to look into a book and be like, okay, yeah, let's see this. Let's see how this feels. And then each one has examples. So you're not just having to then interpret somebody's words and potentially misinterpret it, and shows like, here are some examples of what this modern love language could look like. And then also here are some examples of what it does not and should not look like.
Right.
So that you can help further just reduce the risk of potentially, misinterpreting. Or so you can also see like, oh, I would have thought this would have been an example of solidarity because XYZ socialization of mine, or because what I thought collaboration and community meant actually was a little bit more of like a commodification of it, of like, feeling entitled to a resource or needing to be everybody's friend and no one can be upset ever. These are like real life examples that I've had people even share around like, oh, I didn't realize, without seeing an example of what this isn't, I would have thought this was an example of it because of the lens that I have and like the maybe misinformation or misunderstanding I had about the concept in general. So that's basically, the book. It's like it's really meant to be a guide to the deconstruction process, to make it feel a little bit more accessible and possible without making it more complicated, and definitely not also avoiding further intellectualizing something that does not need to be further intellectualized at this point, because that just means we're all living in our heads and we're not actually like fully experiencing love in our bodies.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I love the book, and I love the workbook and the exercises in the workbook. Do you have a favorite exercise from it?
I mean, to be honest, my favorite ends up being the very first one, because what I notice when I'm doing it with people, or if I'm talking with the clinicians who want to introduce this into their work, we do the activity together in the workshops, even like with the clinicians, just for fun. And I can see people's faces shifting or their body language shifting, and like smiles even around. To me, I interpret it sometimes as a combo of surprise and relief and a little bit of hope and like openness, where they're seeing how accessible the idea of expanding their concept of love is, just by thinking about their own unique experience of feeling loved by someone or something, and then feeling love towards someone or something, and noticing how different they are.
And that is the exercise? That is
the first couple of exercises. Yeah.
okay, because I don't remember, but I love that it's the first one in there and that you use it.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at it right now, even just to see, like,
yeah, how's it worded? Because I want to
well, I mean,
remember.
for folks who can see, this
Yeah.
is what the workbook looks like. Very similar, large font, and each activity is kind of like it builds on the next. So you can start it from beginning to end. You can skip the ones you don't want to do, but the first, I think it starts, let's see, page 19 and 20 is where we get to the feelings wheels. And I made these feelings wheels with just intentional emotions to start with. And then I guess technically the first step is everybody gets a chance to go through the 18 modern love languages and like guess what they think theirs might be. And it's like a yes, no, maybe list kind of.
Right.
But essentially the real clincher is, like, what does it feel like emotionally and physically for you when you're feeling loved? Write that shit down. Keep that in mind. Same thing for feeling love outward. And then notice, where else in my life do I feel those physical sensations and emotions without any of the judgment? Or if the judgment is there, you just notice it and like put it to the side so that you can just see all of, like, here's what love is like for you in general without the lasagna layers of bullshit.
Right.
And then, oh, wow, look at all of the different things in my life, and not just people.
Yeah.
But like things, experiences, animals, places, smells that bring me those same feelings. Wow, I had actually didn't realize I was already pretty good to go with all of these sources. That makes me feel maybe less lonely or maybe less hopeless or like, oh, I actually don't think I'm starting completely from scratch here. I don't know anybody who's literally starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Fortunately. So there's like relief there. And like hope. And then it's almost like, well, so I'm not starting from scratch. So it doesn't mean I have to like work really hard and fast to get a couple of love sources because I've already got some. And then it's also like, oh, wow, I actually, without the lasagna layers of bullshit, I didn't realize how important or relevant a source of love that this person, thing, animal, experience, whatever really was to me.
Yeah.
And now that I know that, and I see how I do or don't prioritize that in my day-to-day or in my week-to-week, that's information around, oh yeah, A, I should be prioritizing this far more, but B, when I am feeling lonely or disconnected or floaty and discombobulated, or I had a fight or an argument with someone important in my life that maybe previously I would have considered a primary source for this, I actually get to see how empowering and how liberating it can be to like be okay with that conflict and not have to then feel like, well, I need this conflict to be done so I can feel loved again.
Yeah.
I can then let that conflict be. I can let it resolve. I can do whatever. I can put it to the side and go to those other sources that bring me these experiences, these feelings, these, physical sensations, and fuel up. And potentially that sort of fueling up experience may then equip me to deal with whatever the conflict is. It may equip me to more healthily, which is, a bit of a constructed word at this point, but like more healthily engage with people I might be going on dates with.
Right.
Maybe when I see how diversified my experience of love actually already is, I'm not going to be putting so much pressure on myself or the other person to like do the whole checklist shit or not give me the ick and now I have to throw them out. Or maybe the ick doesn't show up in the same type of way because I'm not coming in with so much like high stakes pressure around, is this going to be the one? Which is also a scam.
Yeah.
Is this going to be the person? Let's see if they, can successfully audition to appropriately give me the love that is on my terms that I think it should be or should look like. It just makes things can flow a lot easier because like the clutches of like control and conditions and rules just aren't there. So then things can kind of like move and flow along with the waves and the shifting and the fluidity of the relational experience.
Yeah. And looking for those other avenues for love that are already in your life is a really great thing to catalog. I mean, I can't look at TikTok, for instance. I can't look at TikTok because I get a dopamine hit and then I look up and it's 3 hours later and I've just wasted my time, right? But when I really want to, I listen to myself, and I usually it's because I want to feel something, you know? The dopamine is giving me something, but it's not what I want to feel. And oftentimes I will go to my other ideas of how I experience love in my life. And I will go to those experiences as opposed to going to, TikTok or, buying something from Amazon, which we don't do anymore. It's once you recognize it in all the areas of your life and how you feel and wanting to get to that feeling as opposed to what that feeling is supposed to feel like, then I think you are just on your way to experiencing more of it.
Yeah, I would say so. And I also, just to I don't know, not to defend TikTok or whatever, but the experience of love, especially feeling loved, dopamine is among the chemical experiences, right? And so we also can think, I heard you say something along the lines of, what love is supposed to feel like. And that I also I know what you mean, but that can also be a bit of a trap because it's a new condition where we have kind of decided well, the thing I get, just using the TikTok experience, or example, because you gave it, we think well, TikTok doesn't count. It's an easy source of dopamine or whatever, or it's meaningless or, a waste of time or energy, whatever it might be. And so it shouldn't feel like that because of those judgments I have toward, TikTok and how. So then I think of, okay, well, actually, what are all these things that can give me those dopamine hits and potentially the way to not make it like an all or nothing, or to see what it's like to kind of think less about how something, I don't know, should feel like or is supposed to feel. And I think, okay, maybe it's loving to, and this is just a silly example. This wouldn't work for me because I don't do good with timers, but if I really do get a bit of a hit from TikTok, I can give myself a half-hour timer.
Absolutely.
And then I'm okay, this actually was a form of not
self-care.
And I wasn't restricting myself. I wasn't doing the rules. Well, this isn't how I should be spending my time or whatever it might be. And I'm giving myself the parameters so that I can experience it in a way that also is safe for me.
Yeah.
Either saving me from the judgment, saving me from wasting, quote unquote, a whole afternoon or whatever.
Right.
Or getting sucked in. And I'm recognizing that all of these experiences, regardless of the source of them, are among other things, dopamine hits.
Yeah.
And so then I can think of what are, additional dopamine hits in addition to the TikTok experience that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, I don't do well with timers either. I'm fuck you, timer. I'm going to keep on going. So it's if I am going to look at TikTok, because I do, I will do it 10 minutes before my Dateline is going to start on NBC. So it's
timer.
It's a different kind of timer where it's oh, you've got something else for me? Okay, great. And I can get off it because for me personally, spending 3 hours on TikTok doesn't make me feel good at the end of the day. It just makes me feel good right there. But I'll be happy to feel good right there for, half an hour or 10 minutes or whatever, But yeah. And so I think, yes, I think we're both right. Anyway, thank you, Anne. Thank you. I appreciate you coming on. And where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm all over the internet, Hodder-Shipp.com, and that's ship with 2 P's. And you can find me on TikTok or Instagram at the Anne Hodder.
Great. And we're going to have everything in the show notes, where to get her book, her workbook, where to find Anne, all the different places. But please experience her, especially on TikTok, because she's really, really amazing and has a lot of great information to share. So thank you very much. That was Anne Hodder-Shipp, certified sex educator and sex and relationship coach. And I hope this conversation gave you something to sit with, maybe even something to unravel. Rethinking love doesn't mean giving up on connection, It means making room for more of it on our own terms, in our own language, and with the kind of honesty that can actually hold us. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. You can join the conversation at ellechase.com or share your thoughts on social media with the hashtag #TheRevealPodcast. And if you want to go deeper into these kinds of questions, make sure you're subscribed to my mailing list at ellechase.com. I'm Elle Chase. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to The Reveal. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who might need it too. And if you'd like to stay connected, head to ellechase.com to join the mailing list for updates, the Substack version of The Reveal, and early access to new episodes. You can also follow The Reveal wherever you get your podcasts. And if you have a moment, leaving a review helps others find the show. Email for the show can be sent to therevealmail@gmail.com. And of course, if you're on the social medias, I'm at the Elle Chase on all platforms. Until next time, stay curious and remember, the most powerful stories are the ones we dare to tell.